Hey, welcome to today's live event. I'm Chef Scott Samuel here at Ruby. I'm Vice President of Culinary, and I'm joined by Chef Jacquy Pfeiffer from the French Pastry School. And we're going to go through a few key techniques in pastry and baking today. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you're new to live events, you can see on the right-hand side there are questions, and there's a place to enter your own question, and it will be queued up. If you choose to see other questions that you want to be asked earlier, you can go ahead and click the little heart, and that'll move it up into the queue. But we're going to focus on a few things. 3 techniques within the pastry course that we have is an introduction to pastry arts. It's going to be baking temperatures on different aspects of the recipes, base temperature, and caramels. And then on our baking program that we're launching actually next week, we're going to focus on whipped batters, cream batters, the difference between baking powder and baking soda. And Chef Jacquy is going to walk you through this. And then after that, we'll open the board for Q&A and take your questions. So I want to introduce Chef Jacquy Pfeiffer. He's going to tell you a little bit about his career, and then we'll jump right into it. Chef Jacquy.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today and share my ideas and tricks of the trade to you. A little bit about my career and Chef Sebastian Canon's other founder's career. We both were trained in the 70s in France and went through a traditional apprenticeship system and worked in a few places in France, and then decided to travel the world, always working in our field, working in hotels and restaurants and bakeries around the world. And in the 90s, we landed in Chicago, beautiful Chicago, and opened a French pastry school, a brick and mortar pastry school in 1995. During those days and years, we have created 3 different programs, a pastry program, a cake decorating program, and a bread program. We had also various continuing education courses. And after teaching for 25 years, we were lucky enough to meet with the folks at Ruby and forge this wonderful partnership. What this partnership helps us do is to show our expertise and our craft online to anybody who is interested in this. And last September, we created the Introduction to Pastry program. And this coming February 9th, we're going to be released the second program, which is Baking 1 program that is focused on quick breads.
Thank you, Chef. So we'll hear a lot more about your career and your experiences as we dive into some of the aspects today. But we wanted to focus on tips and techniques. We've been getting a lot of questions from the current pastry students and seeing that there's some things that probably need to be cleared up a little bit. So we're going to first focus on baking temperature. And we're going to talk about lemon bars, the lemon pound cake, and a baguette. These are 3 recipes within our program for pastry arts that give you the whole detail, but I think Chef Jacquy wanted to focus on some of the key things for the students. So let's start with the lemon bars and the temperature on the lemon bars and why it's key to have it at a lower temperature. Chef Jacquy?
Yes. So the lemon bars are loaded with eggs and of course lemon juice and sugar, but eggs is the main ingredient here. And every time we cook with eggs, we need to know some not only tricks of the trade, but food science facts about how protein coagulate. Usually, when proteins in the eggs warm up, they open up, and then if the heat in your oven is low, then they will bound again among each other and close again and trap water, and that will make a product that is very moist. If that heat is too harsh, what will happen is they will close very quickly. They will not trap any air. They will have an eggy taste and a rubbery feel. This you can see many times in flans. When you see tunnels in the flan, is because the heat was too harsh. So I know we have a video to show to our students.
Fill the shell with the lemon curd. Bake for about 18 to 20 minutes or until set. Place on a cooling rack for about 15 minutes. Then in the refrigerator until ready to serve.
So, Chef, what is the recommended temperature for the lemon bars? I know it's in the 320 range. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 300 and 325 Fahrenheit, around 150 Celsius. A very gentle heat that will allow those protein to unravel and then close again. So usually every time, it's the same thing for a cheesecake. The temperature is always low, and it's always for the same reason. And chef, you are a savory chef, and you follow the same principle when you're making an omelette. You don't want to use a heat that is too harsh, because the same problem will arise. So at the end of the day, I want our students to understand that food science works for everybody. Hot food chefs, pastry chefs, and anybody who cooks eggs. The food facts of an egg will always be the same.
Yeah, definitely on the savory side, teaching students how to scramble eggs, and specifically teaching my 12-year-old son how to scramble eggs. At first, he was hungry and he wanted to do it quick, and he overcooked it, and they were hard, rubbery, and some liquid leaked out. So now he goes slow and low, and he's like, "Oh, it's not done yet. I'm going to keep stirring it." So the French style that you would know about. So lemon bars are one of the recipes within the pastry course. The next one we want to talk about would be the lemon pound cake. It's a lemon sour cream pound cake. I've made it a couple times. It's wonderful, but it's a different temperature and a different concept. So let's roll that video first and take a look at it. Okay. And then, Chef, you can chat about it.
Okay, fantastic.
Bake for 40 minutes to 45 minutes or until the cakes have risen and the tops are golden brown. Then slightly open the oven door.
So first, tell me about this. It cracks right in the middle. There's a butter line in here that's specifically around that before we talk about the temperature. What's the butter line for?
So yeah, this goes to the tricks of the trade in baking. We pipe a line of soft butter right in the center of the butter. You could also do it with a brush and melted butter, but at the end of the day, you need a line of butter right in the center of the pound cake. And what happens is when fat starts to get hot, it's going to it's going to melt, and it's just going to go down the pound cake. And at the same time, the pound cake is rising up. So the butter goes down and the pound cake goes up, and eventually it will open up with a nice even crack. So that's why we do that.
Yeah, that video looked much better than mine. I think my butter line was a little crooked and it kind of cracked randomly. Okay. But so what's the temperature? What's the temperature for the importance of temperature around the pound cake?
Well, it all depends on what size of pound cake you are making. If you're making a small size pound cake, the temperature in our recipe is what you should be using. I believe it's 340 Fahrenheit. But if you use a 9-inch by 5-inch loaf pan, which is a pan that is very common here, you need hotter heat in the beginning of the baking. You need to know that baking powder and baking soda, they react at a certain temperature, and you need at least, I would say, 375 degrees in the beginning of the baking. I actually made that cake at home 2 weeks ago just to see, and I left the temperature at 375 for about 35 minutes until I had a nice crack. As soon as I had a nice crack, I lowered the temperature to 300 Fahrenheit because I got what I wanted. It's a nice crack, and now I just need to finish the baking to have a completely baked cake in the center. You see, leaving the temperature at 375 for the whole, I think it took me 65 to 70 minutes. That would make the outside of the pound cake too dark. So my recommendation, hot heat in the beginning, maybe 35 minutes until we get the crack, and then lower the heat.
And I know you have a lot of recommendations within our equipment list based on the different size of pans, the 9x5 loaf pan, and sometimes there's a 5x3 loaf pans. Depending on the pan size will kind of depend on the baking time, correct, in terms of getting the crust and finishing it through?
Absolutely. A smaller item is going to bake faster than a bigger item. That's common sense. But at the end of the day, our classes, our recipes are all made for the student to understand how a recipe works. Once you know how a recipe works, how baking powder works, then you can adapt this technique to any loaf pan, and you could even make this then in a muffin pan if you want to make this lemon pound cake in a muffin. Same thing. You just use the same principles.
Great. Well, we will take questions at the end. I see some questions coming in, but let's focus on the techniques that we're going through. The next one is the baguette, and this is a kind of a variety of different temperatures. So, Patrick, let's roll the baguette video, and then we can talk about the low and the high differences.
Turn off the oven for 10 minutes. Then turn the oven back on and lower the temperature to 430 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 minutes.
So talk about the baguette. I've done it a few times. It never looks as great as that video. So tell us and how the students can do their own baguette. What's the temperature concept here?
Well, the temperature is hot in the beginning. The oven is at 425 Fahrenheit. But as soon as we put the baguettes in the oven, we turn off the oven for a little while. And the reason why we do this is because if you would keep that harsh heat, it's very hot, 425. If you keep that harsh heat blowing on the baguettes, the yeast that is in that dough that has one last chance to rise, that yeast will not have any chance because it will get burned very quickly. Yeast eventually dies when the internal temperature of the baguette is between 113 and 122 Fahrenheit, 45 to 50 Celsius. So by turning off the oven, there's no harsh heat. The yeast still has a chance to make those baguettes rise a little bit, and the crust will not develop right away in the beginning, you see? So we're giving the bread a chance to rise. And then after that, we turn the oven back on, and this is where you see those baguettes actually lift up. That's when they get this harsh heat, which is needed to get a nice crust.
So do you ever add any moisture to the oven when you're doing baguettes?
Always. We have a pan under the stone, the baking stone, a sheet tray, and then we just put a little bit of water there just right after we put the loaves in there, and that will create a cloud of steam, and that cloud of steam is going to be around the loaves and protect the loaves from the harsh heat. And also it will melt the natural sugars in the dough and actually make a very nice crust on the baguette.
Excellent. I've been making, as many people, sourdough, and I've been starting at 450 with moisture and then 20 minutes later, turning it down to 400. So instead of turning the oven off, I'm starting with the big blast, and I'm sure that, it's different between the different types of yeast, the natural and the, so.
And different types of ovens. Every oven works differently, and at the end of the day, it's the same as the lemon pound cake. Learn how to make baguette, learn how to shape the baguette, how to score the baguette, and then bake them. And if the first time it does not work at all, you need to ask yourself questions. You can ask us questions. We answer questions on a daily basis. And then many times the answer is right in front of you. Not enough heat, too much heat, and so on. The answer should come eventually from you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chef. So that's the concept, the technique we wanted to talk about, baking temperatures. Let's step into base temperature and tell us a little about base temperature, and then we'll kind of show the video.
Base temperature is a system that will regulate the liquid in dough, in yeasted dough. So raising dough with yeast is just like any other fermentation. At home, I make my own sauerkraut, I make my own kombucha, and I had failures in the summer where the temperature of my fermentation was too hot, right? The product, the kombucha, would ferment out of control and turn really foul, a very foul smell. Same for sauerkraut. I had some big failures. And then in the winter, the basement is colder. This is Chicago. We're talking not Hawaii, and many times the fermentation is not going fast enough. So I have to bring it to another area of the house. And making bread is the same thing. If you make a loaf of bread, and many recipes just say use lukewarm water or milk, that might work. But I worked in Africa, and the temperature in the kitchen was 90 degrees. The temperature of the flour was 90 degrees. And using lukewarm water would just create so much heat for the yeast that the yeast would eventually die, you see? So the base temperature system is basically a calculation of the kitchen temperature and the flour temperature. And then we add those up and we subtract them from something that we call the base temperature. It's a set temperature that was created so that at the end of the mixing, the dough has the ultimate temperature for the yeast to do its best job, which is 73 to 77 Fahrenheit, 23 to 25 Celsius.
All right, that's totally detailed. Patrick, you want to show the little video on that base temperature?
Yeast will begin producing carbon dioxide gases, and the dough will rise when it is placed in a warm and humid setting. If the dough or the environment is too cold, the action of the yeast will slow down, and the dough will have difficulty rising. If the environment is too hot, the yeast will be overactivated, and the dough will rise out of control and collapse.
So that just shows you a little snippet of the video that we have within the program, but there's a whole lesson designed to teach you about base temperature so that you become, it's a practice. You're going to temp the flour, temp the room, and then figure out the temperature of the water so you have the ultimate temperature.
Yeah. And Scott, when I was working in Africa, I took my example when I worked in Africa, we were actually making the dough with ice cubes. Okay?
Oh, really?
And this might sound crazy, but guess what? At the end of the mixing, because everything was so hot, the kitchen and the flour, at the end of the mixing of our dough, we were at the exact proper temperature of 73 Fahrenheit.
Never heard of that, but that sounds something I might have to do in Hawaii when it's 88 degrees out. I'm trying to figure out my base temperature.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Chef. Let's move on to our next topic, which would be the caramel recipe. So we have a salted caramel recipe from Brittany in the pastry course, and we've had a couple questions around the concept of melting the sugar, caramelizing the sugar, the right time, the right way to do it. So let's roll the first video, and then we can discuss that.
Okay.
Continue to cook on low heat, occasionally stirring, until the sugar is completely dissolved and tiny bubbles begin to form on the surface. The mixture should slightly smoke and become golden brown. Don't be tempted to increase the heat. Dissolving the sugar and gaining a deep caramel flavor takes time to properly develop.
So tell us a little bit about melting the sugar and how patient we need to be so that the sugar actually melts and then caramelizes. And I've done this a few times, but give us some insight on what you know.
Well, I encourage people at home to just make caramel just for fun, and for this you just need a pot and then and some sugar, and then you need to find that sweet spot on your stove. Usually it starts on medium heat, and the initial heat is to warm up the metal of the pan. If that metal is not hot enough, your sugar will not melt. Okay, and then what we do, we put a little bit of sugar on the bottom of the pan, and then we just are patient. A lot of people stir because they love to stir. I love to stir, but you need to stir only for a good reason. And once you see that it will take about, I want to say about 90 seconds until it gets going and starts to melt. Then you can add a little bit more sugar, let it melt again. Stir only if you see more melted sugar than unmelted sugar, okay? And stirring too quickly when you add the sugar, what this will do, the added sugar will actually cool down the melted one and make lumps. And if this happens, you just have to take a step back and just let everything melt again. And after a while, the metal of the pan is gonna get nice and hot. And then usually we see that students have to lower the heat a little bit on low, so that the caramel caramelizes slowly without burning. That's very important. But like I said, I encourage people to just caramelize some sugar, and then and even if you don't do anything with it, it's okay. But just to get a feel for it, and I don't recommend using a thermometer, because if you use a thermometer, you're going to look at the thermometer, and actually all you have to do is look at the sugar melting. Okay.
Yep. There's a few details in the recipe besides just getting to know it, but the temperature, you're gonna have a 238 temperature that you will look at the end. The smoking of the caramel, you'll smell a little bit of smoking, and then an amber color. So when I've been teaching caramel in the past, it's hard to say it's going to be a deep amber and start to smoke. Well, when is that, chef? Well, you'll get to the point where you see the sugar crystals melting and combining.
The sugar crystals will start to they will start to melt, and if you want a temperature, I have it in my head in Celsius. It's 185 Celsius. In Fahrenheit, you would have to look at it. But that's when the sugar is completely melted. It's translucent. And my advice to people is, because they never know if it's far enough or too far, get off the heat, take a small drop with the spoon, the spatula, a small drop, and drop a small drop of caramel on a plate. It will cool in about 5-7 seconds, and then you eat it, and then you see if it's actually the taste that you want. Okay, it's not so much a question of color, it's a question of taste also. Some people like it darker than others. And then after that, once you have that, then you continue the recipe, the caramel recipe, by adding butter and heavy cream and so on.
So speaking of that, let's roll into the next video and talk about how to finish the caramel.
Yeah.
The surface bubbles will be large, and the mixture will start to pull away in the middle where the whisk touches the saucepan.
Okay, so describe what we saw there, chef, in terms of the texture of it pulling from the side, the bubbles. What are we looking for finishing the caramel?
Baking a caramel candy mixture is just like baking, cooking a caramel mixture is just like baking a cake. You have the temperature that you're supposed to reach, right? But at the end of the day, thermometers are great if they are accurate. So that's the first check. In our recipe, the caramel should be cooked to 248 Fahrenheit or 120 Celsius. That's the first check. If you see your thermometer has reached that, first check. But then you need to observe the caramel mixture, as you will see bubbles, large bubbles that will pop. And when they pop slowly. That's why I picked that section of the footage. And also when you when you stir in it, it kind of has to look stringy. And once you see those two things happening, then you know the caramel mixture has been cooked enough. Because if he has not been cooked enough, and you think you're ready, you pour the hot mixture in a pan, you got to let it cool overnight, and the next day when you cut the caramels, they are too soft. So that means you still have too much water trapped in that mixture. And an easy way to fix this is to actually take that cold caramel mixture, put it back in a pan, and cook it for like a couple minutes. And the next day, you will have evaporated enough water, and the caramels are right on point.
Okay, so we've seen a few questions come in from students with regards to their caramel being too soft. The visual on the end of the video on making caramels shows you cutting it, and they're pretty firm. So it's too soft because enough water hasn't been cooked out of it. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, and they're just firm enough to hold their shape. And so at the end of the day, when you eat your caramel the next day, if it's so soft it doesn't hold its shape, that means it's not cooked enough. If the caramel is really hard and gets kind of like greedy, you cooked it too long.
Okay. So excellent. So those are the three techniques that we wanted to talk about from the Pastry Arts course that we're teaching, which is a 60-hour course, and there's a link on under our video right here that you can check into it. We want to go into the breads course, and Chef Jacquy and team and I have been working on this for the last month. We're about to launch it on Monday. For those of you that have signed up, excellent. For those of you that haven't, you can see the link in the link right below us. But let's focus on a few things: creamed batters, whipped batters, and then the difference between baking soda and baking powder. So first of all, the recipe we're going to look at for cream batters will be the dark chocolate pound cake. So before we show the video, Chef, what can we talk about cream batters and what you're going to be teaching on the course?
After teaching for 25 years, one of the most common mistake I see when people make a cream butter. So cream butter is creaming butter, usually a pinch of salt, and after that we put egg yolks or eggs or sugar, and we mix it. And very often this batter does not mix well. And the reason, the main reason is because the ingredients are not at room temperature. People scale the butter and then they make the recipe 5 minutes later. That butter did not have a chance to come to room temperature. And sometimes you just have to take that mixture that looks really grainy because the fat actually crystallized, right? Because it's so cold and it does not want to mix with the rest of the ingredients. What you have to do, you have to take that mixture, put it on a double boiler, and just mix it over a hot double boiler for like 30 seconds or so. And you will see it actually will fuse nicely into kind of like a mayonnaise texture.
Excellent. So let's show that video on the dark chocolate pound cake, this first topic of creaming the batter properly.
Add the egg yolks and sour cream and mix until incorporated.
So I like that technique you just gave us, Chef, on putting over a double boiler. That saves time and brings it back together. I kind of, it's not the same thing, but when I make cookies, I don't wait for the butter to come to room temperature. I take it out, slice it, put it in my bowl, and put it over double boiler for 30 seconds, and then I can whip my cream batter right from the base.
Yep. Either way, we're doing the same thing. We are bringing the ingredients like above 70 Fahrenheit for them to play with each other. But one thing I want to make sure people don't do, they take that mixer and they microwave it, because my students have tried that. And we're pretty much making sweet scrambled eggs,
Okay.
So no microwave on that one.
All right. So for everyone on the event right now, in that link, you're also going to find the full videos. So we're showing these short snippets of the technique that Chef wants to talk about, but the full videos are also posted in that link. So let's move on to the next topic, Chef, baking soda versus baking powder. You know, I know students ask me this all the time, and it's like we got to step back and tell you the difference. So let's get to the bottom of it right now.
Baking powder is a mix of baking soda, some acid compounds, and some starches. Okay, and usually what we use is an aluminum-free baking powder. But one thing that is very important is a double action baking powder, which is what usually you find on the market. The baking powder is going to react when it's in contact with moisture in your pound cake mixture, whatever mixture it is. There's always water in a mixture. So that water is going to start to activate the baking powder. But the second activation is happening in the oven, and the baking powder will do its job, which is creating CO2. And those little air bubbles that are being created, they want to rise to the top, and they're going to make that batter lift up. And this is how a pound cake rises. Baking soda is made with an alkaline, okay? Alkaline salt. Alkaline is the opposite of acid, okay? And baking soda is in a recipe if a recipe contains acid. So an acid could be chocolate. Chocolate is acidic, believe it or not. Lemon juice, any kind of fruit. Those are all acidic, and this is where baking soda comes in. And in some recipes, we have baking powder and baking soda, so we get that extra lift.
Excellent. Good description. Let's show the banana pound cake recipe, and then you can discuss why we picked that. So Chef, tell us a little bit about that, since there was no voiceover on that video. Why did we pick that, and what did you want to show specifically?
I picked that because that's when I bake something at home, and I recommend that my students or anybody who bakes at home, that you stare at the oven, not like nonstop, but you need to see what is going on in there, because most of the answers are happening right there. And this is why on every video that we have in our program, there is a footage of how the product bakes, and it shows how the batter lifts up, and this is caused by the baking powder and the baking soda. And it's the same thing. I mentioned that before. You need enough heat for those two to be activated. Otherwise, if you, for some reason, you have a recipe that calls for 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 Celsius to make a large pound cake, it will rise a little bit, but not a whole lot. And if you take exactly the same recipe and you bake it first, let's say at 350, 375, you will see a much bigger lift. Okay, so those are the small details that, unfortunately, that's what makes pastry what pastry is. But at the end of the day, there are always going to be the same reactions, right? So you just need to learn those small tidbits once, and then you know how baking powder works, how baking soda works. And I warn people who think that just adding more baking powder will make the cake rise better. Yes, it will rise better. It will actually rise so high that eventually it will collapse. And also you will get kind of like a soapy taste that we don't like in pastry.
All right, well, thank you, Chef. Let's go into the last topic on the new baking program about quick breads with regards to whipped batters. So you wanted to talk specifically around whipped batters. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I don't want people to think that all quick breads are made with chemical leaveners like baking powder, baking soda. you need to realize that incorporating air already by creaming butter with sugar and eggs, something will happen. Air is going to get trapped inside the irregular sugar crystals. Okay, the tiny drops of bubbles of air are going to be hidden and attached on the sugar crystals. So this air is going to expand and make the product rise. But also in that recipe that we have, it's the chocolate cherry pound cake. We actually are whipping egg white. We're making a meringue. And that's a meringue is pretty much albumin, which is the egg white, that wraps itself around millions of little air bubbles, okay? And the sugar is there to stabilize that meringue. And then this is folded into the butter. And same thing, those tiny air bubbles are gonna want to expand. And they always expand, they have no choice. They expand up towards because they have nowhere else to go. And they make the product rise. So pound cake rising can come from many different areas.
Okay, so this next video is going to be the dark chocolate pound cake again. So we started with the creamed batter, and then we did a whipped batter and folded it into the cream batter, correct?
Yeah.
All right, Patrick? Okay, Chef. So we've talked about a few things, and we just wanted to focus on some tips and techniques on the pastry program and on the upcoming bread program. The bread program, like I said, launches on Monday. It's 15 units, approximately 50 hours. Thanks, Chef, for all the work you put into this one. We're looking forward to it. Now we're going to be taking questions. So let's start with the first question. Here on the list, we have a few to get through. First one is, hello, Chef. I love the pastry arts course, and I'm ready for the next course. I also have your cookbook. Are you planning to write another book later? Greetings to both. Aldo.
Yes, I'll be able to write another book once we have developed all the baking, pastry, and cake decorating programs that we're planning with Ruby. So we have a lot of work in front of us, and we're very excited to be able to share this knowledge online to anybody in the world. But one of these days, I will write another book for sure.
Well, get on it, Chef. You have the time, don't you?
I have nothing else to do.
All right, Chef. So the next question is, will Ruby lifetime members have access to the introduction to baking course offered by the French Pastry School? Carmen, you will have access to this. We have two programs, one with assessments, that is the paid program, and one without assessments. I'm thinking that the baking program has probably 12 to 15 different places where you do something and you take a picture and upload it. But we will have that for lifetime members without the assessments. Thanks for asking. Next question, what would be the best advice to a starter in pastry arts making galette de roi for the first time? Can you pronounce that right for me, Chef?
When you speak French to me, Scott. Galette de roi is the French translation for king's cake. So in France, it's pretty much a disc of puff pastry, and then there's a spiral, a piped spiral of almond cream, okay, and then another disc of puff pastry on top. So you don't pipe almond cream all the way to the edge. You leave about an inch on each side, and then you seal the two discs of puff pastry and with egg wash, and then you put more egg wash on top, and you just make a beautiful design with a knife, and then you bake it in the oven. And this is puff pastry. So puff pastry, let's talk a little bit about food science. Puff pastry is many layers of, take this for instance, this could be layers of dough and butter, right? This is called lamination. This is what we do in puff pastry, in croissant making. Many hundreds and hundreds of very tiny sheets of butter and dough. And both of them contain water, okay? And what happens for any kind of puff pastry baking, we want kind of like a hot oven in the beginning, and that hot oven is going to drive this water crazy and turn it into steam quickly and lift those layers apart and make the puff pastry rise. So that's the first objective. And the second objective is then to bake this puff pastry all the way through in the center. And there we would lower it to maybe 325. So I would say start with 375 until the galette has usually it's about three to four times its height, and then after that lower it to 300, 325, because we want a slow baking to make sure we don't burn it.
Well, that's pretty detailed, Chef. And if I'm a beginner and I'm just starting, would you recommend making a quick puff pastry from scratch, or would you recommend purchasing puff pastry from the store to do this?
Yeah, I mean, there's some stores that have very good puff pastry, and then you can just buy. It comes by sheets, and then you all you have to do is make the almond cream, and then, like I said, cut the 2 discs, and you can do that. You can cheat, but then is it going to be as good as homemade, right? That's the big question.
So Elizabeth, there is a unit on quick puff pastry in the Pastry Arts program if you haven't seen it yet. All right, thank you. So next question from Julian. Is it possible to include how the French Pastry School is coping with the distance and remote learning while in COVID? How engaged, unengaged are students, and how are the instructors meeting, conducting classes, reducing tuition costs? So I think Julian's with the high school having a question on how to deal with this kind of hybrid remote learning situation.
Well, those kinds of classes are done with Zoom. That's the only way, because of COVID. That's the only way we can teach classes. And the key is to really engage the students, to force them to participate. Otherwise, they might just be not even there watching the video. And then I recommend always asking them questions, also asking them to write something about that certain class, the class of the day, and then of course they would have to make a product based on the video that was shown, and like we do in our assessments with Ruby, you would ask the students to put their name on the bottom of the product, write a piece of paper or something, so we're sure they're not picking it from the internet or somewhere. So. But it's all about getting them excited, getting them to do something during the video and after the video. That's how we see that we can keep them motivated, keep them excited.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Chef. So I have a question from Kim here. I love the base temperature technique. If I'm making a dark rye, a Danish loaf with 50% rye, 50% all-purpose, what should my base temperature be?
Good question. You can take this as a very loose recommendation for those that you are making today and baking the same day, right? Make and bake the same day. I recommend a base temperature of 65 degrees Celsius. Okay. If you make a dough in 2 days, that means first you make a fermentation. And then that fermentation needs to sit overnight. Usually it sits in the refrigerator or in a very cold place. And then the next day you add more flour, or you just simply bake that dough the next day. You would use a 55 degrees base temperature. So the reason why the 2-day method has a colder base temperature makes a lot of sense. You cannot use a 65 degree base temperature, which would make the yeast warmer, and let it ferment over 2 days, because it would just ferment out of control, right? And then the problem is, at the end, during the baking, the yeast will have no more oomph in the oven, right? So for a 2-day method, a slightly colder base temperature will end up producing a colder dough, slightly colder, that will rise slowly. And slow rising in yeast making gives you that sourdough taste, but in a good sourdough. a good sour taste, not a foul sour taste.
All right, thank you, Chef. That's a detailed question. Next question is, hi, Chef. Nice to see you again. I have two questions. The first one is, when using a KitchenAid to knead bread dough, should I reduce the time? The second is, my new oven has a proofing option. Do I proof for a shorter amount of time? My dough overflowed. This is from Jamie.
So the first question is, should I shorten the time if I use a KitchenAid
Right.
mixer? No, you should not. And at the end, in our doughs, we always verify what we call the gluten window. And the gluten window happens when the dough is mixed enough. So again, many mixers are different, and many doughs are different. And at the end, you just need to mix the dough enough to develop the gluten enough. And the way we check that is if we stretch the dough and we can see, kind of like we can make a window, and we should be able to actually read something through that window. And the second question is what again, Scott?
With regards to, she has a proofing option on her oven, and it seems as though her dough overflowed. So should you do it for a shorter period of time?
Yeah, do not use those proofers. I have one, and I trusted it, and we recommend, and it was too hot. We recommend a temperature of about 80 Fahrenheit for all the yeast doughs. That's a nice gentle heat for the yeast to do its job. The proofer that I had in my kitchen, I trusted it, and later on, when the dough overproofed out of control, I finally put a thermometer in there, and it was at 110 Fahrenheit, which is way too hot. So I recommend that people do create a home proofer, and that's shown in the Introduction to Pastry course, where you put a pan with boiling water, a small pan with boiling water in an oven, a cold oven, right? You put it in there, and that will create humidity and heat, and then you put your product in there to rise. You see, so it's kind of like a home proofer, do it yourself, MacGyver style.
Yeah, Chef, I have a microwave above my stove, and just the light from my stove keeps it warm in there. So when I'm making my bread, I will just pop it in the microwave for an hour, and it's probably 80, 85, 90 degrees in there, perfect temperature.
But you Scott, you told me before we started this, you told me that it's 80 degrees right now in Hawaii, and plus it's kind of humid in Hawaii. So you actually leave in a proofer. You don't need to do anything. You just let the dough rise outside in temperature. You see, so you always have to go with the conditions you are in. I'm in Chicago. It's like 30 degrees outside, and the humidity, big factor in proofing dough. Humidity here is 10% right now. Everything dries out. So I could not leave dough rise without covering it with a plastic or something.
All right, thanks, Chef. All right, so I'm seeing a new question here. Here's a question about I live at 6,800 feet in Colorado. Can you talk about elevation and its effects on baking cakes, pastries, and such? Thanks, from Cindy.
It's a longer answer than my usual answers. So,
Okay.
But I really want to answer because I have a lot to say about that, too much. But if we can get this person's email, we will send this person a list of recommendation. It's baking at high altitude is a problem because you're so close to you're so high up that everything evaporates faster. Yeah, so you have to put more water in your product and so on. There's many different recommendations, but I have them ready to go because it's not the first time that I get that question. Okay. If it's dry yeast, it's just room temperature in dry storage, in airtight container, dry storage. Yeah, but if you live in a very warm and humid country, then I would put it in the refrigerator or even in the freezer. Why not? Plant-based whipped cream? That's a good question, and that's that's a better question for Chef Fran, who created the program with you, the vegan pastry desserts. She has all those answers. I do not have a recipe to share, and I would share it, but again, if I'm not an expert in this topic, I'm not gonna make up an answer just because. So Chef Fran is an expert in this, and she will definitely be able to help answer this question.
All right, Beverly, I'll put you in touch with Chef Fran to get a good answer. I know she's on the call today. She's probably just... All right, so next question is from Lauren, and it's a few questions here, Chef. Lauren B. What difference does it make to have room temperature items like eggs and butter? Also, how important is it to preheat the oven? Also, how long necessary to chill doughs? And when rolling out dough, is it necessary to re-chill before use? So let's talk about the temperature of the ingredients and the importance of preheating the oven.
Okay, so we have many questions. Yes, so the temperature of the ingredients, we talked about it before. If one of the, let's say you make a pound cake, if one of these ingredients, and usually the main suspects are butter, eggs, sour cream maybe. If one of these just came out of the refrigerator while the other ones were at room temperature, it's going to cool down the temperature and of the mixture, sorry. And what happens when the temperature cools down? The fat, there's fat in sour cream, there's fat in eggs, there's fat in butter, even fat in milk and heavy cream. So that fat is going to crystallize, and those crystals are going to separate. They're not going to want to mix with the water in the mixture. Okay, we think the emulsion is broken. And like we mentioned before, Scott, all you have to do is just take that mixture, go over a double boiler, mix a little bit, and then you will see it like magic. You will see it come back together into a nice and creamy mixture.
Okay, Chef. So I'm going to take these others a little bit more about the importance. How important is it to preheat the oven? I'd say it's pretty important to have it at the temperature you want. You don't want to pop your cookies or your cake in while it's preheating. So bring it up to 350 or whatever temperature it says it should be when you add your ingredients. So that's pretty important.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a recipe where we ask people to not preheat the oven, and nothing comes to mind. We always preheat the oven before we put something in there. Otherwise, the baking recommendation doesn't mean anything. If we say bake something for 10 minutes at 300 Fahrenheit, if it takes 10 minutes for the oven to reach from 212 to whatever it is, to 70 to 300, that's your 10 minutes right there. So always preheat your oven.
Yeah, Chef, as a savory chef, the only way, sometimes I don't preheat the oven when I'm doing like a sheet pan dinner. I'll put my vegetables, maybe a variety of potatoes, greens on a sheet pan and put it in the oven and then turn it on to 450. And if it's on the bottom shelf, it's going to roast it. So sheet pan meals, savory side is one way, but baking, it's pretty precise. Lauren, we have another question. How long necessary to chill doughs? Well, depending on the type of dough, but basically you're chilling the fat in the dough to the point where you can roll it out. Chef, do you want to add to that?
So I don't know what doughs we are talking about, but if it's, let's say, a sweet dough that we use in our lemon curd bars, the dough not only needs to chill, so the fat, the butter in the dough hardens, and we will make the dough more rollable. But also the dough, we recommend leaving it in the refrigerator overnight. The starch in the flour is going to absorb the moisture, and Once it's absorbed, then it will never come out again. And that dough will be much easier to roll. After that, when you roll the dough, your dough gets soft, common sense. If it gets too soft, stop everything, put that dough back in the refrigerator for 15, 20 minutes, or stick it in the freezer for 5 minutes. It just needs to chill so that butter is cold again. Yeah. A $10,000 trick is to roll sweet doughs like this or pie doughs is to take a cutting board, put it in the freezer or in the refrigerator for an hour, and then you use this, put it on your countertop, and you roll the dough on that. And the cool temperature of the cutting board is going to prevent the dough from getting soft.
Yeah, specifically, when it's warm here and I want to make a pie, I roll out the dough, and by the time I've rolled it out, it's soft again. So I'll chill that again before I kind of create the pie like an apple.
Yeah.
All right, Lauren, I hope that answers your questions there. Next question is from Sarah. How long do you leave the oven off while baking a baguette? And what temperature do you turn the oven back on to? So we kind of briefed through that because we're talking about the technique, but the recipe will tell you specifically. But Chef, how long do you turn it off? And then what temperature do you turn it back on?
I don't have the recipe on the top of my head, but I believe it's 10 minutes. We turn on the oven to 425. We load the baguettes in the oven and turn off the oven for 10 minutes. And then after that, turn it back on to 425. Like I said, I don't have the recipe in front of me, but it's in this range.
Thanks. Hope that answers your question, Sarah. It is on the in the course. So Aldo, Chef Aldo again, in the croissant unit, why before baking the croissants should they be left at room temperature for 10 minutes? Great question. I've seen this come through a lot.
Why are the croissants left at room temperature before baking?
Yes.
Great question. Because what we want the croissants to dry out a little bit. Okay. By leaving them out, we allowing the air, which unless you're like in a tropical country, the air will dry out a little bit the surface of the croissant, of the dough, and then make it already get kind of like a semi crust. Okay, and after you bake those croissants, you will see that they actually are crispier than a croissant that you take straight from the proofer into the oven. So that's a small trick. Okay.
There, Chef. There's another question here with regards to croissants. This is from Olga. Hello, I'm learning to make croissants. I bake them at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 18 minutes. They're very brown on top, but when I break them apart, they're still not fully cooked in the middle. Is this a temperature problem or something else with regards to croissants?
What is the temperature this person is using?
350 for 18 minutes.
Yeah, that should be good, but it all depends on the oven. If it's a home oven, I would recommend that you increase it to 375. I think it's a question of, for sure, after 18 minutes, they should be baked. Yeah. But also depends on the size of the croissants. You know, I see croissants here, they're like bigger than my head, and that's very big. And or if you have the smaller croissants. So it could be a question of size, but from what I hear, it's a question of heat. So increase the heat to 375, and then you should get a better result and a better crust.
Yeah, she's noting that they're very brown on top. So it could be, make sure you preheat the oven completely before you add, but 375 would probably be best. All right, so we have a question from Charity with regards to the wonderful videos we showed today. Is that a convection oven used in the video? Which oven should be used in baking for best results?
Well, we used a convection oven in our video, but again, the heat was not very hot. You can make lemon bars in convection oven or conventional ovens. Conventional ovens do not have the fan that is blowing hot air. That's the big difference. At the end of the day, you need to check your oven temperature. Some ovens are just out of control. They're very harsh. and some are much lighter. We have here at the school, we have 4 identical convection oven from the same manufacturer. And guess what? Each one is baking slightly differently. Yeah. So the answer to that is go for a gentle heat. 320, 320, 340 maybe for 320 for convection, 340 for conventional. That should get you where you want to be.
All right, thanks, Chef. Here's kind of another question from Liz. Any tips for baking bread without a convection oven? I can't seem to get a good blistered crust on my baguettes or sourdough.
Cannot get a crust on the baguette?
Yeah, the nice color without a conventional oven.
Definitely, we need water. I hope this person puts water in the pan underneath the oven. We also need high heat. You need to be at 425 to get a crust, and also during the shaping, the smallest amount of flour. Okay, because it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you shape your loaves and you have a lot of flour on there, that flour will sit right on the surface, and that flour will make everything opaque. Okay, once the bread is baked. Okay, so higher heat, water, maybe more water, and then no flour for shaping, or very little.
Yeah, great recommendations. I have a conventional oven myself, so when I'm baking my breads, I start at 450 with the moisture and just get it going, and that helps with the color. So next question, Chef. Hello, chefs. Excited to have this opportunity. I've always wanted to meet Chef Jacquy Pfeiffer. My question, I'm making a 5-layer mousse cake at work. Each layer has a different filling, including a cheesecake layer. They don't stick together. What can I do?
Can you repeat?
She's making a 5-layer mousse cake. Each layer has a different filling, including a cheesecake layer, and they don't stick together. What can I do? So it seems that
the fillings don't stick together, right? Yeah, so when a filling doesn't stick with another one, it's because one of the filling has too much thickeners, okay? And those thickeners, they just, or gums, okay, natural gums or thickeners, what they do, they just grab the water in the mixture and thicken the mixture, and it thickens the mixture on its own, okay? That's the problem, okay? So I would say, remove the thickeners. And the thickener could be also eggs. Okay, when eggs coagulate, they make a cooked product thick. Yeah. So remove the thickeners in your recipe. Not remove, but reduce, and that should make the two fillings stick better. And also, you cannot make one filling first and let it sit at room temp for a couple hours, and then you pour another filling on top and bake the rest, is because the first one will have had a chance to dry out and get a skin. So you don't want to do that. You got to protect the first one. Okay.
Okay. She added a little note to here. It says make the fillings one day, cake the next, and assemble. She's a lone baker struggling with it. So yeah.
There you go. That's your answer. Because she made it the first day, and then the second day she finished it. If she wants to do that after the first one is baked, she should very quickly put a layer of plastic wrap or something to prevent that first layer to not dry out. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Chef and Tiffany. Hope that answered your question. Next question from Sarah. Do you recommend hand kneading dough for a bit even with the dough hook on a mixer?
Do you recommend what? Sorry.
Hand kneading. So, if you have a dough mixer with a hook, you can put it right into the mixer, or she's wondering, do you recommend hand kneading first?
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. I recommend hand kneading. I recommend making every recipe you can by hand. Okay. And because something will happen, and we do that here at the school. The very first yeast doughs that our students make, they make them by hand. And it's like, they're complaining, oh my God, it's so hard and this and that. But what we are doing, we're creating a muscle memory. okay, the students actually feel the dough and how it transforms, and that memory is then gonna be engraved in their brain. And later on, then they can take this recipe and make it in a machine, but they'll know exactly how the dough is supposed to feel. So making everything by hand, any kind of dough, anything you can make by hand, is the best thing ever. It's the best way of learning pastry and baking for sure.
Excellent. Thanks, Chef. Getting through our questions here. Next one is from Lisa. Where do I find the kind of pastry brush that is in all of your videos? So I know we have an equipment list, but Chef, do you have a favorite pastry brush here?
Yes, it's from a company called Thermo Hauser of America, and you can find it on Amazon. There's many different sizes, and we love it. It's sturdy. The bristles are nice and soft, and the bristles don't come off, which is very often a problem with brushes.
Okay, what was that called again, Chef?
Thermo Hauser of America.
Hauser of America. Okay, thanks. So this is a question from Janelle, Chef. In regards to baking pans, I know you like these type of questions. Is there a difference between dark metal pans compared to aluminum pans, and what is your preference?
My preference is it's again going back to learning how metal conducts heat. Okay, and the metal that conducts heat the best is copper. Okay, but copper is too soft as a metal. That's why we don't use it to bake things. So the second choice is steel. Okay, steel conducts heat very well, and so any baking pan that contains steel will bake very well. Okay. After that, you have some pans that have steel and aluminum. Okay, that works too. And aluminum will then be the next choice. It conducts heat too, but not as well. And then you have the other dishes that are made or out of glass or out of ceramic, type of clay, whatever. Those come after that. They don't conduct heat well, but they're very pretty. Okay, but at the end of the day, you can use any of them. Okay, if you know you have a steel pan, let's say the pound cake will rise very quickly. Okay, if you have a glass loaf pan, you might have to add 10 to 20 degrees in your oven to compensate for the fact that it does not conduct heat very well.
Excellent answer, Chef. Thank you. So we have a question here from Meg. This is a nice one. In your opinion, what would be a professional pastry recipe of choice that we could learn to master at home to wow our family of friends? So I have one in mind, but what would you say that could be mastered easily to wow your friends?
Macarons. Try to make macarons, or try to make croissants at home. Those are elaborate recipes, but you know, I grade students every day, and I answer Q&As every day with the students. And at the end of the day, I am not smarter than anybody else. And all you have to do is really dissect a recipe that seems very complicated and just learn what you're supposed to learn, read what you're supposed to read, and then think about all the food science facts and everything that is given to you, and then make the recipe, but break it down in steps. Yeah. So it's not like a big mountain in front of you. And I'm so delighted to see the product made by our students. They wow me on a daily basis. It's just wonderful to see macarons made by somebody at the other end of the world, and it works. And they say, I never achieved that before. So break down the recipe into smaller tasks, and read a lot before you even start cooking.
Yeah, I think the macarons would be my choice as something to master and breaking it down. Yes. Because it is considered difficult. We get a lot of questions, but once you get the concept and the feel for it, you'll definitely wow your friends, Meg.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, question here from Tiffany. For Valentine's Day, I'm making made to order mousse cups. How to keep the mousse from getting too firm so I can pipe it as I go. I use gelatin sheets and egg yolks cream in this mousse.
If it hardens too quickly, you need to reduce the gelatin, for sure. Yeah, that's it. Just reduce the gelatin. We have a chocolate mousse recipe in the pastry program, and there's no gelatin at all. It's the gelatin will set from the melted chocolate. That once it's in contact with the heavy cream is cold, and the chocolate is melted. Those two mixed together, the chocolate will solidify and make the entire chocolate mousse solidify. But gelatin works too. I would say just reduce it a little bit. And happy Valentine's.
Yeah. All right, Chef.
Not
Thank
to
you.
you, Scott. Not to you, Scott.
To Tiffany. So yeah, Tiffany, I've done this years ago in the restaurant, and I had piping bags, and I just kept them at room temperature so I can get through service and make sure that they were not setting before I piped them. So next question is, what are the options for earning a certification in pastry based on Ruby courses? So I'll answer the question. For taking the pastry arts, it's a 60-hour program, and there is a certification that comes with that, and it's ACF certified for the 60 continuing education hours. And same thing for the baking course that's coming out. It'll be 50 hours. So it's just a matter of completing the course, and then there's a place to manage your certification, and you can print up your certificate. So thanks for the question. Next question is from Christina. Would you be interested about doing an online lecture for the students at the National Bakery School in London? I'm a former student of yours and would love that. From Christina S.
Sure. Why not?
All right, I'm going to note your name.
Every time I have a chance to inspire students, I am game because I started pastry when I was 15 years old, and there were some mentors that were there at the time to help me understand pastry and help me believe in this profession. And now that I'm older, it's my job, and I'm an educator at the same time. It's my job to inspire others because it's a wonderful profession. Baking and pastry is fascinating, and I mentioned that this morning to one of my students during the assessment. We are in the business of bringing happiness to people, and so every time I can inspire people, I am game.
Excellent. Christiana, sorry for mispronouncing your name. We'll reach out to you. Thanks for asking. Next question is from Sandra. What is the secret of getting a nice light brown color for sponge cake on top? Chef?
If you see that it's getting too dark, just put a piece of foil on top, okay? And also
the opposite. You want a nice brown color, so it's about putting the foil on top.
So while that answers another question, if your sponge cake is too brown, put a piece of foil. If it's not brown enough, increase the heat by 10 to 20 degrees, and that should do the trick. Also, another way would be to put it one notch higher, closer to the heat on the top of the oven. That might do the trick too.
Okay, excellent. Question from Beverly here. Hello, my cookies and bars turn out tasty sometimes, and other times they don't. I use dried egg substitutes and soy milk and oat milk. I also use oat flour and whole wheat organic pastry flour with different recipes. So help on making sure that they always turn out tasty.
Well, if you use alternate ingredients, you really have to follow a recipe that works, because every time you change an ingredient, unfortunately in baking, it changes the recipe completely, and certain things add moisture, while other things add structure and make a recipe drier. So you really have to stick with certain recipes that work really well, and I'm sure Fran will be able to help this person more, because this person is using alternate ingredients in her recipe.
All right. So here's a question Help. My caramel sauce always crystallizes. Any tips on getting this right? Merci beaucoup. And I'm not sure if this is specifically around a caramel sauce or making the caramels. I have tips around not crystallizing, but chef, go ahead and take this one.
Chocolate will crystallize if it has not. You said caramel sauce. Sorry, not
Caramel
chocolate
sauce.
sauce. Caramel sauce. Caramel sauce will crystallize if it's full of impurities. Okay, impurities will stick to the crystals and then make the whole caramel sauce fail. Impurities can come from a sugar that is not processed enough, a sugar that is very raw, and that contains a lot of impurities.
One thing I might mention, when I make a caramel sauce, and we talked about this before, chef, different than making caramels, but making a caramel sauce, I've always added a very small touch of acid, like a small touch of lemon juice in the beginning, and this helps my sauce from recrystallizing. And I don't stir the sauce or wipe down the sides with a pastry brush. I just swirl it until it kind of crystallizes. It's very different than making the caramels in our pastry course, but the acid will help it from recrystallizing. So you can try that.
Okay, you're doing the right thing by adding a little bit of acid. You inverting. We say you inverting the sugar. That means
Right.
this sugar, once it's inverted, it's not going to crystallize as easily again. Those crystals cannot form so easily because the acid gets in between the crystals. Okay, and if you do add a few drops of lemon juice, it's okay to stir. It's not a problem. And that mixture will never harden again. Okay.
Right. Okay, thanks, chef. Question here from Helen. Hi, it looks like your next course starts on the 9th of February, which you can't make. Just wondered, do you know when will be the running course after that, or you can start anytime? You can start for about a week or so after the 9th start, and I think the next course is going to be starting in the middle of March. So it's a 90-day course. And you can start after the 9th. It doesn't have to be started on that day. It's just about managing your time. But we will have another bread course starting in March time.
Yep.
Thanks, Helen. This is from Lily. Will you be talking about internal temperatures in the quick bread course? What courses will come after the quick breads? Can you tell? I'm having fun taking them. So Lily's been on our pastry course. We have the bread course coming. So are you going to be talking about internal temperatures in the bread course?
Internal temperature of baked product?
I think so, in terms of the quick bread recipes.
Just so we are clear, in professional baking, we never measure the inside temperature of a product. I mean, we don't. Other people do, maybe. But we have a master baker here at the French Pastry School, a French master baker, and that's his specialty. He's been baking for 20 years. And I know he has never taken the temperature of the bread, the internal temperature of a bread, ever. And there's some people, they do that, and that's fine. Usually what you do when you bake, you follow very strict recipes. You follow them to a T, whether it's proofing or baking. And for a loaf bread, we check if the bread sounds hollow when it comes out of the oven. For the pound cakes, we check with a skewer in the center. So we check the finished product many different ways, but for us, we don't check the temperature, the internal temperature of a baked product.
Okay. And she's asking what's coming after quick breads. I know that we're going to be doing a breads 2 course around yeasted breads. And I know Chef has a whole gamut of programs and courses that we're going to be adding from the French Pastry School, from cake decorating to candy making, all coming down the pipeline in the next year.
Yes, absolutely. So after this baking 1 program, it's going to be baking 2. It's going to be all focused on yeasted breads. And that's going to be the same size program, 15 units, 90 days. And then after that, we're going to go into cake decorating 1, cake decorating 2. And then, like you mentioned, confectionery making, sugar and chocolate confectionery making. We have true pastry courses. So lots of French specialties, eclairs and millefeuilles and mousse cakes. And then we have, what else do we have? Tarts, also a section on tarts, which is a lot of fun. Cookies and petit fours. Okay, so lots of work ahead of us, Scott. So
Yeah. So in other words, Lily, this is just the beginning.
we're just warming up right now, Lily. So, but we're gaining speed. So, but it's an enormous amount of fun, and with the Ruby team, we're having a blast, and we're gonna continue like this to develop short programs in the years to come.
Yep. Thanks, Chef. Thanks for the question, Lily. This is a question from Chris. When making macaron and similar meringue types, what do you suggest as flavor and color additives? Freeze-dried fruit, powder color, gel, fruit paste. What's your recommendation on the flavor
shell,
color?
Very good question. The shell is usually colored with a powdered color, and that's the preference. After that, you could use a liquid. Some people put a liquid coloring and they put it in the egg white. Okay, you can do that. But the reason why we prefer powder is because the powder is untouched. Okay, it's just the color in powder form and nothing was added to it. Some liquid colors like gels, they contain a very long list of gums and acids and all kinds of additives that are just going to throw off the entire recipe. Okay, I can tell you in production making, people who make tens of thousands of macaroni every day, they always use powder. Okay, and then the flavoring of the shell, usually we don't flavor the shell. You can sprinkle things on it. You can dust something on it, but adding a flavor to the shell will change the shell. Because a flavor could be some lemon oil, and oil is fat, and now you're adding fat to this shell, and that's going to change everything. So it's better to not mess with the shell, which is good news because you just need one recipe of macaron shell. After that, change the color, change the look on top, and then the filling inside, in between those two macarons, is where you can really make a difference. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you, Chef. So here I have a question from Jamie, who's a lifetime member. Will the assessment-free course for lifetime members also begin on the 9th, February 9th, and begin notified? And will we be notified? The assessment-free will happen about a week and a half later. So we're getting this Quick Breads one launched for Monday, and then the assessment-free will be next. So Jamie, I will reach out to you to let you know when this is happening. Next question is from Sue. I have completed your course and I do have your book. I've made the recipes in the course and would like your suggestion for a list of next best recipes to make. So it sounds like she's ready to go to the next step.
Next recipes are the baking one course.
Yes.
There's some fantastic recipes, and I'm not saying that to sell the course. Sue is a very good student, and I really appreciate how seriously she takes pastry, as I do. But in the baking one course, we have great recipe like gâteau basque, like cannelés, and even just making a wonderful scone. All those recipes they say something different, and they use different methods, popovers and this and that. They are all in the same category, but they're all very different. The churros that we have in there is just wonderful. So you can dive in that. After that, if not, we can go to the next step and make something more elaborate.
Excellent. Thanks for your input. Sue, the world is your oyster. Next steps here. So hi, Chef Jacquy from Nemanja. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. There's no question. She's just here saying hi.
Hi.
Also, last question here is greetings. I'm from Honduras. Temperature here is really hot. What can I do when I'm making any type of dough so the temperature won't affect it? Best regards, Alexandra.
Move to Chicago is the first step. No, I'm just kidding. try to definitely follow the base temperature system, which will actually make that the water or milk she's using in the recipe is going to be colder. And that's going to actually calm down the dough and bring it to a low temperature. And so that dough is not going to rise out of control. I worked in tropical countries for many years in my life, and we always had to do that, just work with colder yeasted doughs. And then to proof them, we were just keeping them outside, but try to have a draft going so that it doesn't get too hot, right? It doesn't get too hot. If you have an air conditioner, you can use that on a low mode maybe. But other than that, a draft should help that.
Yep. Well, good note. Chef, this brings us to the end of our questions and the end of our third live event together. So thanks for sharing your time, Chef, and thanks for everyone who joined us, and signing off until next time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody.